This is our second year of the Arts and Science Festival. It's something that we're doing in partnership with the Sitka Sound Science Center, and we couldn't be happier with this partnership. We, as the Sitka Fine Arts Camp, admire their work so much, what they do and what they've done for our community. And we believe so much that the same creative spirit that drives artistic discovery and artistic creation is the same spark that drives scientific inquiry and scientific innovation. We also believe that essentially both areas are exploring the same idea, which is who we are, what is this earth that we're on, and how do we fit together with these things. And so for us, bringing a festival together of these two subjects is natural and I think important. And this is our second year. We're really, we see you as early innovators. We find that any program we do takes a number of years to build and grow, and we really, really depend on people coming out and participating at the beginning. You are the folks that make this possible. So thank you so much for coming tonight. It's we have wonderful folks in the next 2 weeks that are going to be sharing talks and workshops, and there'll be Monday tonight, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week, and then the following week the same. Before we introduce our faculty for this week, I'd like to invite the director of the Science Center out, Lisa Bush, who's going to tell us a story. Lisa.
Hi, my name is Lisa Bush, and I'm the director of the Sitka Sound Science Center, and I'm also a student of the history of science. And the reason I'm a student of the history of science is I was not the world's greatest scientist, and I'm not a scientist, but I love the culture of science. I love being around scientists who are into discovery, and I love watching how new ideas come to be. And as a student of the history of science, what I've noticed is that the history of big scientific ideas really happens at the nexus between art and science. And you see this over and over and over throughout history. A couple of examples: Copernicus, who figured out that the Earth was not the center of the universe. He got his doctorate degree in canon law, and he was a classics expert. And he studied those things alongside of astronomy. You may have heard of a young man named Leonardo da Vinci, who was the designer of the helicopter, the inventor of the parachute, the tank. He was also one of the world's greatest artists. And then to jump ahead in time, Steve Jobs. He really appreciated form and function. He was both an artist, a businessman, and an engineer. And for us here in Sitka, we have a very cool, what I think is a cool connection to the history of science. And that is, our connections began in the 1920s in Monterey, California. There were people down there that included people like John Steinbeck, Joseph Campbell, who was a mythologist, Ed Weston, famous photographer, and a man named Ed Ricketts, who had a marine specimen collecting business. And he would go into the intertidal, collect little critters, put them in jars, and send them off to colleges and high schools around the country. And his lab became a sort of salon for these people. So they would get together and they would talk about ideas, and they would drink wine and have a good meal and read poetry and share ideas with each other. Well, one of the members of that group was a man named Jack Calvin, and he was a writer and a teacher, and he met a young woman from Sitka, Sasha Kashavera, while he was down there. She was part of the gang as well. They fell in love, got married, they took a canoe trip from Tacoma to Southeast Alaska, and they got up here, they got to Sitka, Sasha's hometown, and they looked at each other and they said, Ed is gonna love this place. And so they wrote to their friend Ed Ricketts and they said, you have got to see the intertidal up here. So they went on an adventure in the Calvin's boat, the Grampus. They picked up Ed Ricketts and Joseph Campbell aboard their boat down in Tacoma, and they came up to Southeast Alaska, and they drank wine, and they read poetry, they read Goethe, and enjoyed each other's company and shared ideas, and they collected things off the beach. And after that voyage, Ed Ricketts and Jack Calvin wrote a book, and it was called Between Pacific Tides. And what was really special about that book was it was a textbook of the things they saw on the beaches, but they didn't list things taxonomically. They grouped things by community, the way they are in a tide pool. They grouped things by ecology. That term really hadn't been used. It wasn't common in the lexicon at that time. And so, long story, Stanford University Press almost didn't publish the book. They eventually published it. It is now in its 6th edition, and it's Stanford University Press's #1 best-selling book. And Ricketts and Calvin are considered the fathers of modern marine ecology. So Ed Ricketts went back down to Monterey. Jack Calvin stayed here. He had a family here and got involved in lots of things. And over a beer, I'd be happy to tell you more about Jack Calvin. But we at the Sitka Sound Science Center feel like we are carrying on the legacy of Ricketts and Calvin. Our story is is part of Sheldon Jackson's history. So Sheldon Jackson was a little college here. As part of the college, they had a salmon hatchery. And in 2007, the college announced it was shutting down. And they did it kind of quickly, rather abruptly, and they gave everyone 2-hour notice, and the salmon didn't get the notice. So the salmon were returning to the hatchery, and people from our community came and helped to stabilize the hatchery. And once that was stable, then people from around the state gathered, and they sat down and they said, Sheldon Jackson really did a lot for our state in terms of science research and science education. What are we going to do now? So they decided to form this nonprofit, the Sitka Sound Science Center. And our mission is quite simple: science education and science research. Everything we do relates to those two things. Let's see. So on the science education side, we do K through 12 programs. We have after-school programs, summer camps. We do field courses with universities. We have a partnership with the University of Alaska. We entertain visitors all summer at our small aquarium. And then on the research side, we conduct research on the things that people here find relevant. So we're looking at the interaction between marine mammals and commercial fishing. We're looking at ocean acidification and its impact on kelp. We are looking at the relationship between hatchery salmon and wild salmon, and a whole host of things like that, and mostly with other universities and other entities. So, and I guess I should also just throw in, when I started at the Science Center in 2010, I was the main employee. We had 2 part-time employees as well, and now we have 15 year-round employees and then another 15 or 20 in the summertime. So we're really proud of the fact that we're kind of creating jobs and we're part of the community. So that's our story, and here we are at this moment. You are about to embark on mixing art and science, and I really feel like that is where it's at. This is a very exciting moment for all of us, and I thank you for wanting to participate in that. Thanks so much.
Jackson. I'm the program director here at the Sitka Fine Arts Camp, and I'm so excited to welcome our faculty tonight for the Sitka Arts and Science Festival. And they're going to come out and then they're going to introduce themselves to you.
Karaoke, anyone? No? I'm Ellen Weinstein. I'm an illustrator from New York. I've been an illustrator for a little over 20 years now. And I teach and I travel quite a bit. And I'm really excited to be here in Sitka. It's my first time in Alaska, which is really pretty thrilling. I left 95-degree weather in New York. And but I actually illustrate a lot of science material in my work. So there was an interesting kind of convergence of it there. And I'm teaching a collage workshop here And we have a really great diverse group of students who come from very different backgrounds and disciplines, which is also another reason why I'm excited to be here, is to be with this wonderful faculty of people who do completely different practices from what I would normally encounter back in New York. So I'm excited to meet all of you. I'm excited to work with these guys and learn more about what they do.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Kitty Labounty. I know a number of you. I live in Sitka and I've lived here for over 30 years now. I teach at the university, and so I'm normally teaching fairly straightforward science classes, you know, introduction to biology and all that. So it's really a pleasure to get to teach an introduction to plant identification and an introduction to, you know, our wonderful flora we have here through this camp. And I should also say it's really kind of thrilling for me because I've been on the board of the Fine Arts Camp and I'm currently on the board of the Science Center. And this has always been one of my dreams, actually, is to have an arts and science camp. So I am super happy to be here. So, thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I am so excited to be back for my 5th year teaching fish skin baskets. And I'm very thankful for the Sitka Fine Arts Festival for inviting me back for the 2nd year. And the students today are working on sewing on their baskets. So I think Thursday night at our reception, I hope you all come. It's going to be very beautiful. Plus we have some students here in Sitka from me coming 5 years that are continuing sewing with beautiful fish skin and doing different artwork. And I'm so proud to be here. I love Sitka. So it's very beautiful here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm with this group, but they're way more talented and wonderful than I am. But I'm happy to be here, happy to be in Sitka again. Why they keep bringing me back, I don't know. But I'm a photographer. I'm an editorial and corporate photographer. That's been my stock and trade for the past 30 years. And more I'm trying to wind down. I had to move out of Alaska to get away from work. But now I have a lot more time to come and do these types of things, and I'm a lot happier. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Clark is going to do our presentation this evening, and he's the goofy guy around here that carries his camera everywhere, so he may ask you to make your photo this week. And let's give a warm welcome to Clark Mishler.
I've been making these presentations now for years, and people have said to me, Clark, you really need to write something about your life. And I'm trying to write a book about it. But in the meantime, I wrote this little introduction in the last few days, and I'm thinking it's someday to be something more than just an introduction. To say that I'm an audio-visual learner is an understatement. I grew up in Detroit, and I didn't learn to read 2 words in succession until I was 16. My drawing skills were pretty evident at age 5, and my painting skills were developed at age 11. In my high school graduation class of 900, I was dead last. And I wanted to go to college, so I, in spite of my counselor who tried to talk me out of it, I went and took the SAT. And my score was so low, and I'm not kidding, they returned my money. They thought they'd made a mistake. I knew better. And I never retested. So I enrolled at a school, a state school in Michigan, that would accept anybody with a pulse and a tuition check. Luckily, this particular school had a fabulous art program run by a bunch of old art pros who understood the business and recognized talent. And amazingly, for the first time in my life, I actually excelled. More than half of my freshman class flunked out or dropped out after the first semester. I, on the other hand, made the dean's list. And I went on to get my associate's degree and eventually was accepted to the Art Center at the College of Design in Los Angeles, where I worked associated with some of the most talented students in the world and held my own. After college, I traveled to the one place I had always wanted to live, and I arrived in Alaska in 1971 on a one-way ticket and $52 in my pocket. It was here that I honed my graphic design skills, and in 1990, where I became a photographer and began to work for national and international publications and corporations. On January 1st, 2010, I started the Portrait a Day project and have produced at least one portrait every day since. The first 5 years of my portrait project took place in Alaska. Since moving to Calistoga, California in 2015, my project has begun to look very different. Tonight, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite entries from both Alaska and California. This was a young lady who I had photographed some years before for the cover of Alaska magazine. And I asked her, I saw her in a restaurant, and I asked her, I said, "May I photograph you?" And she said, "Yes." And then afterwards she says, "Do you remember me? When I was 11 years old, you put me on the cover of Alaska magazine." And I was kind of surprised. And this began a long kind of story about meeting people who you have photographed in the past, people who have, maybe you photographed their father or their mother or their brother or sister or uncle. I tried to photograph people and something about them and their connection. Something about, I just realized this timing is off. Something about the connection to what they do. Sometimes I photograph people with native regalia. This was about 20 degrees and we were freezing. This man was fabulous. He didn't want to use his real name. He's kind of a nice guy, but we're gonna have to stop this. Let me fix this. It was a gun shop in Anchorage. And he was kind of nervous about my taking his picture. But in the end, we had a great conversation, kind of made a connection. I mean, photographing at 20 degrees or 0 degrees or sometimes even 20 below zero, I learned how to use my equipment in a way, and oftentimes lighting equipment, at extreme temperatures. was at a downtown picnic. I call this Winter Dogs. And while it's a portrait of dogs, basically, it also says something about the people who own those dogs, don't you think? You know, I try to say something about people's relationships. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. The Alaska State Fair is one of my favorite venues. And I think it's funny because if you look at those chickens, they're all being held by the right person. This is my friend, Fred, my best friend. And he's a lawyer and weekend woodcutter. I like playing with diptychs, where we do two different portraits of the same person and put them together. Two brothers. He had just gotten this fishing pole. He hadn't even put it in the water yet. And I stopped him and I asked him if I could make his photograph. And he made his photograph. He says, "Can I go now?" I don't know. I do have a thing for chickens. I'm not sure what it is. Two brothers. I love photographing brothers. Sisters, they're not as interesting. But brothers, for some reason, are real interesting. They have a real kind of level of acceptance of each other. This guy would walk past my house in Anchorage every single night on his way home. And so I would often photograph him. And he's always dapper, always had a great coat, always had a great hat, always carrying the same briefcase. This is a young lady who was hitchhiking, and I gave her a ride back to her hotel. And she was from a very small village out in western Alaska. And she was contemplating whether to go back to the village or stay in Anchorage. This is a Mexican food truck in Anchorage, very famous Mexican food truck. This is Olivia who runs that. And I wanted to get a photograph of her in her environment. I love photographing families. Families with dogs, particularly. And they're out for a ride, on a very cold evening, just like somebody would do in London. I love all the little things in the background. My neighbor, she had this great door to her house. So I was kind of attracted to the door, and I asked her if I could photograph her in front of them. This is in the grocery store in Anchorage, and this guy was saying, yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with Anchorage. This is Alaska's only Cooper. They make barrels. He and his assistant. The wonderful breakup in Anchorage, where everything turns to slop for about 2 weeks. It's an attorney on his way home. I mean, sometimes you're just attracted to something like a helmet. You go, wow, I got to photograph that helmet. And, you know, and I think that this picture, I think a lot of these pictures are going to be way funny in about 50 to 100 years.
Not that long.
I mean, I love the puffy coat, you know? It's just like, it's funny. This is a friend of mine. Guy actually helped me the first day I arrived in Anchorage in 1971. He was working for the state government, and he told me, he says, you know, Clark, you're the only person I actually ever helped. I said, thanks, Bill. I love this one. His mother said, this is a perfect picture for Flynn. He just turned 13. He thinks he's the center of the universe. And sometimes you get the best quotes just out of kind of like people who look at your pictures and they give you the quote. I was down taking pictures of the water. A friend of mine paddles up on a board. And I go, wow. Sometimes they just kind of, the photographs fall into your lap. Something very American Gothic about this picture, Alaskan style. Van Hale owns a restaurant in Anchorage and also has a fish permit to go out and catch fish out in Cook Inlet. So he brings them back and he has fresh fish for his restaurant every night. And then he sells the extra ones. And oftentimes I'm down there to buy it from him. 3 students, all from other places other than America. They're all in Alaska going to school. And they're all loving it. I mean, sometimes you take 10 or 12 pictures and the best one is the eyes are shut. We talk about these photographs in class, and I don't know where my project is going. I really have no idea, but I love doing it. This is the family that lived across the street from me for 15 years. Another fellow photographer. And I just love the way that, he sort of looked like the wall behind him. My neighbor. Dog walker. He wanted to go live in Paris someday. A lot of Pacific Rim people live in Anchorage. A lot of communities all over the Pacific Rim. Two former assistants who stopped by. Alaska State Fair, always good for some great portraits. This little girl was there with her cow, just showing. I mean, kids are great because they're so random, They're just always going to do something great. You just have to be ready. My neighbor was out pulling carrots in the fall. This is the Anchorage Unicycle Club. I like that guy's pants. This is a Russian girl who was finishing up her studies and going back to Russia the next day. A young filmmaker in Anchorage. A young lady at a women's retail store, small boutique, downtown Anchorage. guy was helping me rake leaves. Neighbor kid. I love the diversity of Anchorage. There's so many different people who live there. Over 100 languages spoken in the school system. Graphic design friend of mine on a beautiful fall afternoon in Anchorage. Westchester Lagoon in Anchorage. It was like probably less than a quarter of a mile from my house, and always a place that I could go to get a portrait. Year round, it was always a great place. There's a guy making a political statement. An old Dillingham resident who moved to Anchorage. This was on Super Bowl Sunday. He was going downtown to a birthday party. I don't think they were watching football. I think I wanted to say something about the cold, dreary, kind of long winter days in Anchorage. Some days you just felt like making that picture. This is my mailman. He was always happy that I took his pictures because he would send them to his mother. This was a young lady who started playing hockey when she was, I think she was 9, and she was now in her 30s, and she had played professional, college and then professional all over the world. And she says, I have to stop doing this. Every part of my body aches. Great looking trees, aren't they? Fourth of July. Guess where we are? Calistoga, California. And just kind of like, I saw her coming out of her house and she was going to a luau. And I said, I have to make this photograph of those trees. Sometimes you can just see something you have to photograph. Sisters, on their way home from church. Calistoga is 50% Hispanic, and 50% of the people who are Hispanic do not speak English. So it's wonderful to watch and to see the American dream happening before your eyes. We have a 12-year-old child interpreting for their mother and their father and their grandmother and their grandfather. This is the art instructor at the local high school. And I wish I would have had an art teacher like this in high school. He's great. These are three friends that get together every other week at a local restaurant and solve the problems of the world. They've got their hands full these days. This is one of the original houses in Calistoga. Dates back to the 1880s. This is the current resident. It's a farmer's market every Saturday morning in Calistoga. This woman just turned 100, and she makes quilts for the VA hospital. She makes, on average, 12 a month. My neighbors, and I'm sometimes just attracted to things like he's wearing the right colored shirt for that tree behind him, and the little piece of red that he's leaning his knee on matches the back of his truck. And just the way this guy's holding the hose, you can't make this stuff up. It's like, it's poetic, don't you think? And I love the rose tree with the picture of the rose. It looks just like it, doesn't it? This is elementary graduation. And the elementary school is 50% Hispanic. And graduation from elementary school is the biggest event of the year, right next to high school graduation, which is equally big. So socially, this is the big event of the year. Women's aerobic class at the community pool. You can't make this stuff up. Two friends who both work in kitchens, and they like it. They like it when it's busy. Last year we had a water emergency, so we couldn't use very much water. So these kids would have 10 minutes a day to play in the water, and that was it. And they go nuts. This is the Mexican rodeo, which they hold every year on 4th of July weekend. And the difference between the Mexican rodeos and American is that they don't use their hands to hold on. Which to me seems a whole lot more difficult. This is my neighbor Martha, who was out picking up apples from her tree. A couple of roofers. Nice guys. circus comes to town every year. They put up a big tent, about twice the size of this room. And they have jugglers. This guy was from Italy. So it's always fun to go over and photograph the circus while they're practicing and setting up. I had a chance to do it again just before I came here. Local grocery store. So there's, this stuff is real simple. It's like who we are. These are the pictures of who we are. Two high school students and a recent graduate go into a dance at the fairgrounds. Calistoga's half the size of this town, Sitka. It's a very small town. I've worked here longer than anybody in the entire building. I've been here 27 years. A marketing student at Chico State, a home for the holidays. The local Ace hardware store. This lady makes the keys. This guy was great. I said, so what do you want to accomplish in life? He says, I want to master success. I said, good luck with that. Young lady coming out of the Saturday market. Local cabinet maker. He built some bookcases for us. He liked the photo. All the kids actually know me now. So when I'm riding around town in my car or truck, they wave at me. It's great. My neighbor, Ella. This guy runs a little bed and breakfast with a vineyard in the front yard. This guy Tommy says, I work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, every week. I've never seen people work so hard. Everybody has at least one job, often 2 and 3. This was the first kind of outside barbecue of the year. All the neighbors got together. local Russian Orthodox church. It's Mother Tabitha. She's about 4'9". She's very funny. She used to lift weights on Venice Beach. She said, "You know, Clark, the good girls don't become nuns." Local tree crews are sort of the firemen of the area. They come and they rescue you from trees that are about to fall on your house because they're rotted out. It's very dangerous work, highly skilled work, and they're worth every penny. This lady was in an anti-government march in downtown Calistoga. My neighbor running with his 2 rescue dogs. I came across this kid. He was like, we had quite a bit of rain this winter, so there was a lot of puddles, and I saw this kid playing this ball, and his mother was there, and I stopped and I asked him, I said, "Well, what is it you like about puddles?" He went, "Pretty much everything." This woman, she says, "I was born in this house, and the only way they're taking me out of here is with a toe tag." This woman didn't want her face on my portrait blog, so I asked her if this would be okay. And she said, "Yeah, fine." I think it's still kind of a nice photo. Two roommates, they said last year our front yard was all weeds. So we planted poppies this year. They were pretty successful at it. Sorry, more chickens. Only in California would somebody come around and wash your dog. So the catcher was really a great guy. He says, "Yeah, we had kind of a rough start. We lost our first 3 games." He says, "Then we determined we weren't going to lose anymore. And we ran out the season without another loss." Tough guys. He says, "I love it here, but it's a little small for her." So that's why we still have our place in San Francisco. So we got both ends of the scale in it, Calistoga. I'm not sure why this picture's in here, I just thought it was pretty funny. High school graduation is huge. And it's so big that there's not a building big enough in town to hold it. So they hold it at the Speedway. It holds about 3,000 people. They almost fill it up. I think that's pretty iconic. These guys have been going together since they were like 13. He just graduated from college, or graduated from high school. And he says, she wants to marry a rich man, so I'm going to college. I want to be a rich man. There's a local tour of the historic sites of Calistoga. There's Ella again, my neighbor. She's always willing to have her photograph made. I saw this tree and I said, I have to meet the person who had that tree cut that way. So she was very nice and came out and allowed me to take a photograph with it. He's very proud of his 1971 Volkswagen. This guy's a house painter and weekend bull wrangler. And I said, have you ever any desire to ride the bulls? He says, no, those guys are crazy. There's a little girl in a dance troupe that performed at the 4th of July parade in Calistoga. Concert in the park where everybody brings a picnic lunch and the city allows you to actually drink wine in a public place. Local bakery, the night crew. It's a local guy. Anybody know this guy? Yes. I saw him last night. I put him in here and I was going to ask if anybody knows this guy, please tell me his name, because I photographed him the last time I was here and I neglected to get it. Jerry, I know. Funny. The last time I was here, 3 weeks ago, I photographed many of the artists. And so what I'm trying to develop a little more now is my artist portrait series. So these are some of the artists that we had. I love this quote that goes with this one. He says, about a year ago, I broke up with a woman with whom I had a very long relationship. Art saved my life. Remember Abel? He was working at the museum here for about a month or so. A novelist, teaches at the University of Iowa. I call this Adam Man. He's a hula hoop. He's an English guy. Bags is his name. Really funny guy. Very talented. This is Fernando's wife. She says, when I paint my face green, it'll be a lot better. I never saw it. Visual artist from Harlem, New York City. Shot right here upstairs. This lady was going through a crisis. She says, you know, I practice 8 hours a day. Same things over and over and over. She says, it's about as far away from being creative as you can get. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, Mark Calistoga.
I had an assignment. I was living in Anchorage, and we got an assignment to go down and photograph some property down there that was owned by somebody in Anchorage. And I took my wife with me, and we really enjoyed it. And came back to Anchorage and gave the lady the photograph. She says, "Oh, these are great. We want to send you back." So we went back the second time, and we're sitting out in the middle of a vineyard eating cheese and crackers and wine. My wife says to me, "I want to live here." Besides that, our grandchildren are an hour and a half away. That was a real decider. And we knew we'd probably be coming down to this area, but where? And that was where we ended up, as in Calistoga. Yep. Yep. Oh, hold it there.
Roughly how many of these are stage shots and how many are happy accidents?
They're all staged. You know, in pretty much all cases, the people I photograph are aware that I'm taking the photograph. I go up to them and I say to them, "Excuse me, I'd like to make your portrait. I'm a professional photographer, and I've got the longest running portrait blog in the world, and I'd like to add you to that portrait blog." And they go, "Okay." About 95% of the time, they go, "Okay." Amazingly. And I think that has something to do with the fact that I'm small, I'm old, you know. Safe. I'm safe, yeah. But yeah, there's an interaction, at least a small interaction prior to that. Question here?
It was kind of the same, but it was like on that last picture there that had pop cans and stuff around. Do you set the whole stage up?
Oh no, that was absolutely the way it was. Yeah, I mean, I don't add anything. I don't even tell people how to stand. I mean, I might ask them, you know, I'll take a picture of them standing, you know, maybe hugging, and say, "Okay, now let's take the same picture where you're not touching." You know, that's about as much direction as I give. But yeah, I generally, you know, in the case of the little kid on the table, I said to the lady, "Do you mind if I make a photograph of your child lying on the table there?" She goes, "Oh, no, go ahead." You know? And then of course I got, you know, the email and sent her the photograph. That's the other thing, is I follow up with an email image to everybody I photograph.
And do you tell people to look in the camera?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll take a picture and I'll say, okay, now look out the window, and I'll shoot them looking, 90 degrees to the image plane. But generally speaking, I have that connection with them looking into the camera. It's pretty formal stuff. I mean, really, if you look at portraiture back, hundreds of thousands, hundreds of years anyway, where people are painted looking into, looking at the person who's painting. Yeah.
A lot of them have a painterly quality to them. Do you manipulate them?
No. I mean, nothing out of the ordinary. I don't do any heavy-duty Photoshop at all. I do oftentimes bring up the shadows and push down the highlights. It's a little contrasting, and maybe a little vignetting, but very little. And sometimes, I convert to black and white. They just seem to work better as black and whites. You can go to my blog at Clark James Mishler, and you can see 7.5 years of imagery. And you can see the variation. But so it's really hard to go through all that stuff and pick out 100 images. Can you imagine? It's like, how do you think of that? So every time I show this show, it's always different. I try to show the most recent stuff I did. Like that stuff at the end was all just shot like 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
I just noticed on the picture with the woman in the door that you like the door and you cut off the top of the arch of the door.
I don't know. I don't know what I have no idea what I'm doing. But sometimes you just kind of, it just feels right. And there's really no explanation for it. Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting, I was telling Tyler, that I have no idea what I'm doing, and I think that's the fun of it. I thought when I started this project that after 6 months, certainly a year, I would pretty much know what I was doing, and that I would know where it's going and why I'm doing it, and so on and so forth. I'm 7.5 years into this project, and I still don't have a clue. And isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? That this is indeed a process and not a product. That every day I add to that process. And I'm hoping that someday I'll go, oh, this is what this all means. And I think that, my introduction, I try to touch on some of the things that have, in my life, that have happened, that have brought me to the point of doing this. I think they have to be a little bit insane to do something like this. But it's like having breakfast in the morning. I can't not make my portrait a day. Can't do it. I can't go without breakfast. Gotta have breakfast.
How much does your experience doing professional photography beforehand influence the portraits that you do now, do you think?
Oh, I think certainly it does. Everything you do in life, supports what you do later. And as an artist, I don't think, I think it was Philip Glass. Familiar with Philip Glass's work? Philip Glass said, he says, you spend the first half of your life trying to develop a style. He says, then you spend the second half of your life trying to get rid of it. Right? And I think that, a lot of my imagery I look at, I go, come on, can't you do something better, something new, something different? And it's hard. You are who you are.
Do you think not being able to read, you use the other part of your brain a little more, or are you just
The other side of my brain's dead.
do you still...
There are no lights on in that house. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering, some of these shots that are inside buildings and people
Sometimes I knock on doors. You know, if there's something about the house that says knock on this door, no. I mean, sometimes I'm driving and I see somebody walking out of the front door and I'll pull over and I'll jump out. By the time I hit the front gate, I'm there saying, excuse me, may I make your portrait? And it's just that, it's impulsive. And I think it has to be that way. You know, and the fact that, you know, I've always got my camera within arm's length. It's always with me. You'll never ever see me. Like I told Tyler, I said, when I first met him, I said, if you ever see me without my camera, I owe you $100. Doesn't happen. Well, you've all been great. Thank you so much.